Hello everyone and welcome to Adobe Live. I'm your host, Cyn Lagos, a freelance graphic designer based in London. And today we have a real treat. We have the pleasure to have on stage a street photographer and graphic designer, Cyn Lagos. Cyn, how are you doing?
Pretty good.
Yeah. Awesome. Excited to share your work and to see on your design process. It's going to be a good one.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I think we're going to have a lot of fun exploring photography and graphic design together.
Wicked. I'm already hooked. I can see as well. Everyone's coming in the chat quite thick and fast. A massive hello to Sam, to Jack, Olivia, Olive, I should say, Frank, and to Paula. So a massive welcome and hello. And as usual, if you're on, YouTube, that's amazing. But pop over to Behance, and that way you can, ask any questions directly to Cyn whilst you're designing. And you can get that on b.net/Adobe Live. So pop over there and you can get some questions in and we can talk directly with Cyn. And just before we get started, something to kind of mention is that before you start your day, definitely check out some of Photoshop Creative Challenges. That's hosted by Wayne Askarth every weekday at 9 a.m. Pacific time. So tune in and challenge yourselves with some new prompts every single day. So Cyn, we should definitely tell the lovely audience who you are, what you're about, and obviously what you'll be working on today as well.
Yeah, sure thing. So hi everyone, my name is Cyn Lagos. I am a Latin American visual storyteller. I have a focus on graphic design, photography, and film, among others, because I can't help myself. We're just having a conversation about this. I'm constantly learning new Adobe skills. And today I think we're going to be experimenting quite a bit. This is actually a result of me experimenting at home. I had no specific purpose for this project, but I think that's sort of how most ideas kind of surface, right? Most of the fun ideas, right? Having a little bit of freedom to just experiment on your own. So I'm gonna be showcasing a bit of compositing in Photoshop. And on day 2, we're gonna play around with animating our final design.
Nice. Those keywords like experimenting and playing around, I feel like those are the kind of things that I just like anyone wants to hear as a creative. So I'm super excited to get it cracking. And we can see as well in the chat, people are coming in thick and fast. So, definitely, mention where you're tuning in from as we're kind of going through today with Cyn's stream. And again, we've got Claddy, we've got Steve, Lisa, everyone's coming in and everyone's kind of greeting. So everyone looks like they're super excited to watch you perform some magic, Cyn.
Yeah, thank you. So I just want to give you a little bit more insight on my background. My curiosity for photography, film, really all sort of stemmed from my graphic design background. And if you are curious about that, you can check out cynlagos.com. At the moment, I've been actually trying to put together the diverse portfolio that I have, which can drive you sometimes mad because I can't seem to put myself in a niche, right? But that's actually a strength I've come to learn. And I have some really cool examples of layout design that involve my photography. And I think this process alone has, so this is fairly new. So if you want to go check that out, if you are familiar with my site, but you want to check out some new stuff, go to cynlagos.com. This is kind of like a nice affirmation for me of, oh, wow, I'm working on really diverse things, but they can all sort of still belong together and give light to the different types of techniques that I have and that I know and showcase them in different disciplines, right? I have a little bit of branding, a little bit of the collage that we'll be doing today. Here's an example of that. This was a past project that I worked on with Adobe Photoshop for Adobe Max 2019. Seems like forever ago.
Millennials ago.
Yeah, millennials, like a whole decade in terms of moods. Yeah, and that also stemmed from a collection or a series of photos. So these are photos that I photographed in Miami, Florida. And Miami, Florida just has this very special sort of cohesive kind of pastels all the time, right? And the geometry that seems to be everywhere. So that evolved into something like this, which I'm really, really proud of because it's one of those things where you really don't know what's going to come out of it. but
So you play
you know,
around and experiment.
experimenting.
Yeah. For me, the
Experimenting
things that
is
straight, the
key.
color palette is so strong. I mean, as you're kind of scrolling through, you know, the orientation you've got and the shades and different tints, it's
Yeah.
beautiful. I really, really like it.
Yeah, I actually in school, one of my professors would always make fun of me because he would say, you're using teal and yellow again. Those are my colors, you know.
Was that your colors?
Back in college, I think I still love teal, but I'm not sure if yellow
I
shows up in everything. But you know, warmth and
that's a strong color palette. I mean, even that red on where you got the photo and you got the walk on either side of that red, it just pokes out so well.
So one way or another, there's like a through line. You can sort of tell if it's my work or not. Yeah, it's been really fun just experimenting with photography. Now I'm trying to educate myself in the space of film. And I think like many of you guys out there, you know, we use the internet as a resource, and it's been so awesome because it just in general, being able to learn these little things that sort of relate back to the first programs I ever learned. So Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign were my core programs. And then now it's this new learning of After Effects, Premiere, even a little bit of Audition. I feel like that's like the other trio that tend to go together.
Yeah. I love that. And it sounds as well like you've over time and you know, you organically just, you know, you're kind of utilizing the different platforms, different programs that are out there and actually knowing, you know, which one's kind of in sync with one another in terms of how they can kind of operate, and which is quite cool as well.
Yeah. And I think, you know, we can choose whatever we find ourselves more interested in, but I think the constant pushing of how can I become a student again? How can I be start from scratch? And you know, it's great to be an expert at things, but I'm just curious to feel that way again. Learning something, like fresh.
Yeah, no, I get that. And the beauty as well with Adobe Live is that the audience that we have, it ranges from whether you're a graduate, you know, in the industry for quite a long time. And I mean, that's the beauty why people hopefully, you know, tune in to sort of see your methodology and your workings out. And, you know, it's I feel like we're going to get a lot over these 2 days in terms of, you know, your thought process and everything you're showing us now. I mean, this is only just stuff you've done. It's insane. So I'm super excited to
thank you.
And I'm sure everyone else is as well. I can see the comments are coming in quite thick and fast. We've got Paula who said, wonderful graphic photos that you shot. You utilized them perfectly for the collage. And then we've got Lisa, great. Steve said fantastic work, Cyn. So yeah, they're all coming in quite nicely.
Nice. Yeah, I'm really curious to learn what disciplines you all practice. Maybe you have one that you like more than another, right? Maybe we practice more than one, but I'm curious, graphic design, photography. I mean, the work we're going to be doing today, I feel like it's a bit stems from maybe a lot of us practice photography, right? We tend to have more than one photo to post. We tend to have like a series. I feel like this project was inspired by having one too many photos and wanting to make something completely brand new from it. So yeah, if you're a photographer, give us a nice shout out there on the comments and let us know.
That's a very good point. I mean, definitely, like Cyn said, you know, so, you know, where you're kind of tuned in from as well. It'd be good to know, you know, where you're tuned in from. And also, you know, what's your kind of background? You know, are you learning? Are you already in the industry? You know, are you photography, graphic design, you just tuned in? So get those comments in. And obviously, like I say, we'll read it from Behance. So, you know, tune in there, and then I'll make sure those go directly to Cyn while she's designing. So keep those comments coming in.
Yeah, any questions too, because what we will be focusing on today involves quite a bit of learning a few of the tools and techniques within Photoshop. I think Photoshop tends to be like, I actually got this question today recently. What is your favorite program? And I feel so like I hate having favorites. It's like it's
like a favorite child, isn't it? You shouldn't really say.
It's like when they ask you for your favorite color, you're like, but I love all these other colors. So I said Photoshop because it tends to be like, say I was lost in an island somewhere. I feel like it tends to be one of those things where you can animate in Photoshop if you wanted to. You can develop some 3D elements if you wanted to. At the very base, like it's such a foundation for photo editing and just masking things out. So some of the techniques I'll be sharing today have a bit of those examples where if you just master some of these tools, you become very familiar with these tools, you can repurpose them for different situations and different scenarios.
That's a really good point.
Career,
and just, I mean, just leading on from what you said as well, that idea of, keeping your brain curious and wanting to learn. I mean, that's quite a nice time to kind of, plug, especially for those who are quite new to Adobe Live. There's so many different tutorials and challenges as well that sort of test your knowledge on the different programs. So again, for you guys, if you're just kind of joining in and you're very new, definitely check out some streams. And Cyn said Photoshop's her favorite. Mine's is InDesign. I'm gonna be very biased. And
oh really?
Oh, definitely. That's my soft spot. Editorial and print. So InDesign.
Oh, nice.
InDesign's my baby. But Photoshop is what I guess we're on Photoshop today, right? Is that right?
We're on Photoshop. Yes.
Okay.
I know InDesign doesn't seem to be one of like the most popular, most designers like.
Don't say that.
So I'm really like shocked that you said that. I actually really love InDesign. Just made a recent set of business cards yesterday. Nice. And I was gonna reorder the same thing, but then I get kind of enjoying the composition, the layout design, and I just got lost in it and created a brand new one and reordered it.
I love that. I'd love to know as well what everyone else's favorite programs are. Are you team InDesign, team Illustrator as well? We can't forget Illustrator. That's always a. Oh yeah. I mean, that's a soft.
That was a big one. Yeah.
Programs. But should we crack into it in your first in Photoshop?
Sure thing. So I just want to sort of give you a bit of an idea of how you can get started. So I would say if you have any photos in your phone or that photos that you haven't posted or you haven't shared yet that maybe you didn't know what to do with, they're not necessarily the hero shots of your photo shoot, but they're a good collection or a good series. I would say bring those out, something like 4 or 5 pictures, and then we'll be putting them together into a layout such as this one. Of course, you can kind of recreate it in your own way, but that's sort of how I started. I had 4 photos. I think it was 4 at the end, 4 images. So these images I took in Big Bend in Texas, the national park in Texas. Crazy adventure. This house here on the left-hand side. I still don't remember the name of this show, The Cowardly Dog.
Oh, we had this. Do you remember? We had this chat when we.
And I don't think you knew, but everyone else I told it to, they were like, "Yeah, that's the house." And it was a kind of a frightening house. It was in the middle of nowhere, but the great benefit of that was, the Milky Way was absolutely visible. I kind of went for it and took some shots. I don't know that I have exactly the right lens. I think I had the right camera. I was just playing with it. And I'm still nonetheless really proud of what I got. I'm sure like on a technical level, maybe I have a lot to learn, but it was so much fun. And it's so satisfying to kind of see the result and be like, wow, no way. Like it's ironic to have your lens focus to the infinity icon, because it's quite literally focusing on infinity, which is the stars way beyond. And I was like, oh wow, that's why. So these are the photos that came out of that. I didn't know what to do with them. I feel like there are so many versions of a Milky Way out there, and there's so many renditions of these things that I just felt like, well, it's not quite a hero shot. Some of these aren't quite it. They're a bit blurry on one end. I wasn't sure what to do with them. So I found that though,
right? The blurry, they're kind of like, it's just organic. It's just the way it is, right? It's that blur, it's the unfiltered, which is quite nice.
Yeah. I love going for the photo that people don't want. So I'm curious why. Yeah. I do have a folder of blurry images, like a collection of just random blurry images. So we'll put these together. I'm going to open up Photoshop and give you a few examples. Actually, we're going in random order here, but here's another example of collecting a photo series and just building your own. And if you're familiar with my Adobe, my Behance live streams, maybe you got to join me when I was creating this one. We pulled a few of the assets from my library where I collect all the things that I create on Illustrator, anything I create along the way. I keep them within my library because it just gives me such a quick like ability to create something brand new while still sort of having my style of work embedded in there. So some of the graphics that I created here for this design came from,
they look awesome.
Just
I love the shape.
all the many times that I played in Illustrator, which I just I love Illustrator on the iPad so much.
I need to experiment that more. I haven't taken full advantage of what you can do on the and that's not me plugging. That's generally I need to definitely experiment. I mean, if anyone's done a bit of experimenting on the iPad for what you do in your craft, let us know. We'd love to hear it. But that's the beauty as well with what we're doing at Adobe Live, and even Adobe as a product, that there's so many updates and so many different features that you can just experiment, have fun with, and have different perspectives on it all. So yeah, definitely get them in the chat, and we'd love to know your kind of different thought process.
I love creating abstract shapes because it just gives me room to create something, whereas it's not explicitly like meant for one poster alone or one singular design, but it just lets me sort of like play with colors. I can even play with the modes on this abstract shape here and start to mess around with how it blends with my photographs. Okay. So there's just so much room to I love having a collection of something that is specific to something I make, having my own treasure box of assets, right? And so it's a lot of fun. In regards to the live stream, not to like stray too far, but here are some examples of that. Look, there's that abstract shape again.
I can see you got so much content. Before we for anyone again, for you joining now, Cyn and I, we had a little catch up about a week ago, and we're kind of checking out each other's works and designs, and honestly, I'm in awe with the work because this is not your first time to you've done Adobe Live many times before, right? So this is like your first rodeo in terms of
we've done it a couple of times. We've been here at different hosts though, so this is our first time with Kieran. So it's been really cool to just be a part of this. And I think my first time was actually in Paco Studio in San Francisco, and that was so much fun. I saw
a video of that on your Insta, maybe of like going to the green screen, and
I was so in awe of like the entire setup. And I was like, I have a green screen here, which I hardly use now, but you just had to do it because
that would be cool. That would be very, very cool. I mean, the closest I get to a green screen is a green wall behind me, but I haven't actually had fun or experimented using the green screen. But that would be cool.
The lighting gets tricky, but it's been fun being part of Adobe Lives, and mostly just interacting with folk on like real time is one of the parts that I really enjoy. So I'm going to jump into Photoshop now. I welcome you all to just ask questions along the way. Let us know if you are curious about something in particular that you're trying to explore in Photoshop.
Nice. We've got some lovely comments, and we've actually got a question from Lisa who said, so Cyn, do you ever take assets from creative platforms?
From creative platforms like other artists?
Yeah, I mean, if you let us know, Lisa, what you mean by platform. I guess maybe assets. Yeah, I'm actually not sure. It'd be good to know.
Yeah, I think what comes to mind is Adobe Stock or the subscriptions that are happening in Behance live streams. So there's a lot of artists that are providing some really cool assets, templates in the subscription base. So it's a cool way to receive sort of like monthly or weekly assets. I have one of my own where I provide some of the assets that you see here. And it's a cool way to receive those without having to kind of pay per thing. And it's a little surprise element. It's like, it's not my birthday, but here I
treat myself
another set.
I love that. Actually, so Lisa actually mentioned, so thanks for clarifying that actually. So she mentioned like free pick or like, yes, basically stock platform. So kind of what you mentioned before. I mean, Behance is a great, that's a great tool for finding, loads of assets and almost like mock-ups as well. I mean, a lot of the lives that I've done, there's always towards the end of the streams where you do like the mock-up presentations, and that's a really cool way of like, presenting your work, whether it's to clients or, as a final piece. So yeah, that's a really great question, Lisa.
Yeah, you can often find them like in terms of Adobe stock, you can find them here too right away. There's just like an easy accessibility to all sorts of templates. So we're going to create, I think I'm going to be sharing this likely. I did share it once already, but I'm going to be sharing this. My 2 platforms that I've been prioritizing has, because I cannot multiply it myself enough, has been Instagram and Behance. And those 2 are vastly different. One is horizontal, the other one's vertical, but I'm going to go with the vertical one for today.
Nice.
And so I'm going to do 1080 by, I'm going to say 1350, which is the Instagram grid post.
Do you know what I love about that? Like as creators, we actually know it's already embedded in our brains what the dimensions are for like, for like the platforms. That's like a robotic sort of computing.
I love using the artboards in Photoshop also. I feel like ever since they were made, I hardly not use them. I think they're very helpful in my process. It sort of emulates the artboards in Illustrator, which was one of my favorite features to begin with. So I'm going to check that box to make sure it's an artboard, and you'll be able to tell right away once you click on the edges of your artboard. You'll be able to see that you get these little plus signs around, which what that does is that it'll help you multiply that same dimension so you can create a couple of different forms, especially for things like a grid, the carousel on your Instagram grid. This is a very easy way to sort of input your artwork and create multiple of the same size.
See, Anika's and totally agree. She mentioned the most underrated features in Photoshop sometimes. So yeah, that's pretty much, everyone's got their own kind of like, I guess, what it is that they really kind of like within the sort of Adobe hemisphere of programs, which is quite cool.
Also, a lot of Photoshop fans.
There are. You're in the right place.
Let's hope so. If you're not, you're in the right place.
You are in the right place, and in terms of wanting to learn about different programs. So yeah, get those questions in. I can see they're kind of coming in, which is quite nice.
So one of these little tricks that I learned along the way is, instead of dropping my file, say I used to do this where I would drop the file directly. That functions just fine. It's an embedded image. I don't have to worry about looking for it or things of that nature. But if I, for example, have it in a separate project, which I do in this case, I have it in this presentation, I can right click and look for duplicate layer, right? And that brings up a dialog box, which asks me, okay, let's duplicate this layer. Do you want to duplicate it in a document, in a separate artboard? I have at the moment the untitled artboard that we just created, right? So I'm going to send it in that direction, and I have artboard 1, right? So when I press OK, it'll send it in that into that project. So it's a nice way to sort of, you can duplicate full folders. They'll just sort of fall in place. And especially if you're working with multiple projects, you're trying to find an asset that you used previously in a different project, and you just want to be able to duplicate it. I feel like it's kind of tedious to be pulling the artboards. So, the more if you're a graphic designer, that one of the key elements of being a graphic designer is becoming, very Speedy Gonzalez, very fast and quick in your workflow. So any little thing, I think, that I learned that it's kind of hidden, feels like an Easter egg. So I'm totally like for sharing those type of
No, I get that. I mean, do you I am guilty of I do love a color code. I mean, I've mentioned this a few on lives that I've done, but I definitely like color code my layers, even if it's just like a red for I'm currently doing it, or green is all good, you know, sort of. Are you a color code, and even with folders, do you live by color code?
You can just. Yeah, I love color coding it. Sometimes it drives me a little bit crazy to not have the opportunity to like compartmentalize everything or like name everything. Like if I don't have that option, I start to get really like flustered. As you can see, we're working on the windows right now. Do not be upset with me, but I
didn't know that actually.
I use Windows. I use Mac also, and it was a whole learning experience. But I love being able to know both. It's been kind of cool to be hybrid.
I love when you said Windows, if it was like almost like a, oh my God.
I know, I'm scared now. Like, actually,
it was going so well the stream, and then
it was going so well.
No, that's cool. That's a very good point. I guess it is cool because I mean, not everyone uses, you know, it is a bit of a misconception. Majority uses Apple and the products, but you know, there is opportunities to use both platforms. So it's having an understanding of both. And again, I've always found when I'm just say doing a piece of work and you send it off to another designer or to another platform, you know, what are they using on their side? You know, is it compatible, and understanding those elements? So it's good to have an idea of, you know, both sides of the pond, as it were.
Yeah, I think so. So I'm gonna hit Control T or Command T on a Mac. Let's be conscientious of both. And that's gonna allow me to transform my images. And I can hold Shift there to make it stable.
Good, lovely comment. Whilst you're doing that, I was going to say, a lovely comment from Steve, who said, "It's so great to see an artist like Cyn, who takes awesome photos and is also a very talented designer." So, lovely comment. Thank you, Steve, for that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there's a lot of us out there that have the word that I think is trying to catch up is that really complex word, multidisciplinary.
I have to write it out. When you say I have to write it out, my brain can't come.
You know, yeah. So it's like a tongue twister, but there's a reason why it's out there. It's because we have so much access to online education. I think that really has changed the ecosystem of what it means to be a designer. At least since I started, I mean, being a designer meant you had to choose, okay, well, I'll build my design work around illustrations or branding or web design, but you chose. It was very particular, and you learn your lessons in school, maybe a few at work, you know, by trial and error. But I think now having so much access to work gives us like kind of more room to learn different disciplines.
Yeah, it's that flexibility, right? Freedom. I think it's, I mean, everyone's got their own perspective on especially on our industry, but I think the underlining thing should be just flexibility, and just you kind of have the option to, especially if you're in maybe a full-time employment or freelance, that you can kind of experiment, you can kind of allow your brain to have fun with the programs and to create, you know, different projects. And actually, it's funny because when you mentioned this now, a question I was going to ask you soon, and because I did research before we came on, I know you do a lot of skillshare as well, don't you, with the platforms that you work on, and you kind of share.
Yeah. So, actually, I've always been a student of Skillshare from its inception. Actually, they went through like a rebranding. I was there for that. It feels kind of cool to kind of see them just explode. And it was sort of this very hidden gem for me. It was fun to be able to learn. I love that it was design oriented. That's what I loved about it. It was very focused. It's a bit different from YouTube in that it's more long form courses. And we were just chatting about how little attention span we have nowadays. But I dare counter that, because I feel like I learn more in long forms. Things like live streams are very helpful for me, because it's a bit of a different style. The fast pace leaves me sort of too overstimulated. So Skillshare has courses, so you feel so good, you know, completing each lesson, knowing to kind of revisit those lessons. Sometimes I listen to them. I don't even watch them. I'll listen to them while I cook or while I'm driving. So I created a class with Skillshare, and I love it because it centers around the concept of visual language. So how we explore visual language in different mediums. In this case, it's exploring it in photography. But I think you can adapt it to absolutely everything. You can adapt it to design, right? Like the communication element of bringing in colors as a symbolic nature that expresses a certain mood, bringing layout design as a way to create a sense of like speed, or create a sense of sort of minimalism, or whatever it may be, right? Like creating a little bit of angle. Like next time you watch like a Nike commercial, you'll notice like most things are at an angle because they're trying to get you to feel that sense of sport and go-getter attitude. So all those things we learned in graphic design, and I think being able to readapt them in different mediums was an aha moment for me to understand that it's just visual language.
That's so cool, and it's actually cool hearing you explain it as well. It's again when we had our first catch up for the first time, and I remember because we're from different different upbringings, different backgrounds, but I think the beauty of obviously understanding how you operate as a creative, where you're based and vice versa in the UK, it's so cool to know the differences. I think that's one thing. I think with Adobe Live especially, it's the beauty of seeing people interact and have a conversation regardless of the different backgrounds, cultures, and creative discipline, which is the beauty of it all.
Yeah, right. We all have also different ways of learning. So what I like to do here is I always start. So in terms of workflow, if you notice, I also transferred over like some of the title names that I had on my layers or my files. So I'm already in more or less an organized place. So I have two backgrounds. I have the main background, and then I have background number 2. So I'm using this as sort of a separation in the layout. I try to find, let me turn this off. I try to find different ways to compose something, whether you're working with, even in photography, this applies, right? Whether you're working with your lower thirds, or you're choosing to maybe create, if you look at album covers for records back in the days, you'll see a lot of this, which is like a third of it is displayed with vertical, horizontal. So that already plays with a bit of, I can do half, and that's already like it starts to give you a base of what the layout could be, right? Yeah. So being able to move your photos around, we can get really dynamic like Nike does and start to do something a bit more horizontal and create like an interesting duo world in.
I feel like it'd be crazy not to mention you on this whole topic of dual world before for those tuning in, but just before we came onto live, us and Pac had a chat about the multi-universe and different Marvel. Without getting too off piece, because we could easily go off piece about Marvel, but like, that's quite nice how you mentioned that split universe. So I'm all good for when you show us these different kind of universe.
You're a big fan of Marvel, I see.
I'll geek out for at least another hour, but yeah, I'm sure a few people in the chat are maybe as well.
Yeah, I like to learn a little bit about everything, but that I must admit that I went to see the movies only because my fiance took me. So yeah, it's one of those things. I know, but you know what? Okay. I learned a little bit about just why people like it. So in this case, I'm going to put it right in the center. I think it creates a nice sort of going into the space, like a Z, your Z axis.
We've got Anika, who said a very good point. Yeah, let's better not get into that topic of Marvel because it's like a slippery slope into the universe. I know Anika's a Marvel fan too, so welcome. And hello to everyone who's just joined. Who's just come into our Adobe universe.
So one thing that I notice in these images is that I have a little bit of a highlight area here. Let me see if I could I'm going to turn this thing on. There you go, so you can see it. So I have a bit of a highlight area here and a darker area. I'm gonna make them sort of opposite. That's why I flipped it so that you have visibility. So I'm gonna be using this in a way so that I can blend all the images together. I think that will be our last step, just being able to blend when you're doing compositing, it's nice to be able to blend images, whether it's using lighting or you're just brushing off the edges, things like that really play a good role in blending in. So I'm going to do that. Now I'm going to do the circle here. So I'm going to duplicate this one just to duplicate the layer in place. So there's no choosing a destination, it's just in place. And I'm going to select the marquee tool and make sure it's in the elliptical marquee. And right here on the right-hand side, you'll always get this shortcut display. And I love keeping that in mind because I love being able to just click a letter M and know that I get my marquee. And again, speedy, right? So that's a good way to
good for a shortcut,
to find the shortcuts. Yeah. So what we're gonna do here, yeah, absolutely. So we're gonna do here is this is the first time we'll be creating a mask. And if you're not familiar with masks, masks do this really fun thing where I'm just gonna remove the bottom one so you can see what I did there. So masks do this really fun thing where they hide and then they reveal an element, right? Depending on what area is painted black or it's painted white. So for example, in this case, once I click the add layer mask, it paints the center white, and you can see that there. So wherever that white is being displayed, it's almost like a window into your artwork. And wherever the black is, it's going to be hiding those elements. And masks are one of my favorite things to use in absolutely everything. Even in Lightroom now, there's like a whole new set of masks that you can use to be able to retouch your work. So I think that's like one of those fundamental things that if you get really accustomed to, you can get a lot out of it. So if I remove this little link here at the bottom and in the center, I can actually move with the move tool. I can move around what part of my image is being showcased.
That really looks like a Twilight Zone, you doing that with the motion of the space and so hypnotized by that. I love that.
It's pretty cool. So it's interesting because it's in moments like this when I'm just playing with Photoshop that I start to see, that's a good opportunity to animate down the road. Maybe this is the way it gets revealed or it's introduced into the frame. And basically that is a great entry point to just, if animation, it feels intimidating to you, just recognize that whatever kind of move you're doing in the creation process within Photoshop can be animated within 2 points in a timeline. Yeah, if that makes sense. So we've created this circle here, and I think I'm going to flip this one, the circle, because it's slightly different from the other one, so that we can see it a little bit better, right?
I'm quite curious, whilst you're doing that, Cyn, so I mean, obviously we've seen a bit of your work and you showed us your website, and is this something that you studied at university or did you go to uni? What's your kind of, for those again who maybe just joined in and quite curious about your background, how did you kind of get into what you're doing now? Which probably a big question, but,
so I'm trying that on a different color, so let's see if it stands out a little bit more. So I have a bachelor's in fine arts and graphic design. And it was a really interesting decision for me to decide to move forward with graphic design because I always loved anything creative. I love creative writing. Entering the world of art is kind of like a touchy subject in any Latin family, right? It's just like, wait, hold on, you're gonna be an artist with a beret? That's kind of weird, like.
Nice.
Right?
Strong look.
So the point of being able to say I can do art, but with computers, which computers are the future, was sort of my pitch to my family, and I think that worked out. So it was something that I honestly felt like maybe this is something really interesting that I can pursue. And I ended up loving it. I didn't, after that, I actually didn't question it again. It was exactly what I needed. I love the challenge of being a bit techie and exploring ideas in a digital space. I love the landscape of this craft also. I love that there's constant output of new work. I mean, the Adobe team with the Adobe Creative Suites is constantly pushing new programs. Like now I'm playing a bit with immersive technology. So a bit of like 3D renderings and, on working with Aero a little bit to just play around and see what's possible, right? Just, there's always just something new happening and I'm never bored. So I love this craft a lot. I love being able to kind of also sort of find the layers, I guess, find it a way to get to know the bare bones. So photography feels like one of those elements that I used to always have to find stock photography for. And then I started to just say, well, I wonder if I could take this photo. And I wonder if I can start playing around with that. I was on Instagram from the heydays, like when it was like an abomination. Cool. Yeah, it was an abomination if you photographed with a DSLR because it was supposed to be Instagram, right? It was supposed to be from your phone. And that's hilarious, by the way.
I love that.
Because now it's mostly video. So it's been such a whirlwind of changes. But yeah, I actually was encouraged by one of my friends to join it because, he actually said it to me like, you're a graphic designer? I mean, you're an artist and you're not on Instagram? And I'm like, what's Instagram?
It's just like,
I didn't know what that was. And I was like, you know what? You're right. This is a nice, cool way to just try something fresh. And so I started to play around a little bit with that, and that evolved into, I mean, it was cool right in the beginning because the community was small. So right at the start, I got showcased by Instagram. I was featured and it was like, nice. Whoa, it was wild. It was my phone was just exploding and it was really cool. Now it's this whole thing, right? I went to Japan and somebody said, wow, you have 38,000 followers. And I was like, whoa, that counts here too,
Yeah.
So it was kind of one of those things where I just kind of kept dedicating myself to pushing whatever sort of expression I was working on. And now I'm constantly reminding myself not to limit myself to what the audience might expect. Even if that hurts a little bit in terms of engagement, I think what's important is to constantly challenge yourself and not let yourself yield to those expectations, because that's very limiting, right? Like what we know now is not necessarily what's going to be the future, unless we're playing around, right? Like
that's a very good point. Yeah. I mean, just leading on that, because that's the vibe I totally get. Even when we first started talking, and even now, is that you're forever keeping your brain and that creativeness afloat, and you're forever wanting to learn. I think that's the beauty of our craft, where it can be quite easy to be complacent, and I think it's very it's the goal really should be just to keep on wanting to learn, because there's no end goal to this, and also it's subjective as anything, right? It's very subjective to what you put out there. So I think that's the beauty of having fun with it, experimenting, and also doing a lot of side projects. For those, I mean, again, when I give a lot of talks at universities and for graduates, it's always a case of wanting to do work because you want to do it rather than because you're told to do it, which I think is such a big difference. Which is why side projects, I'm a guilty one of doing side projects, because I love those, because it just kind of keeps that level of boredom out, because you can just keep on going and have fun with it.
Yeah, and it's where you get to kind of just break all the rules.
Totally. There is no first rule of Instagram.
There is no rules.
Yeah, exactly.
So I found this font that kind of reminds me a bit of Star Wars.
I was gonna say that actually. Yeah.
All we need to do is hold on.
Are you gonna warp the text so it comes at an angle?
Skew it.
I love that. Oh, I'm gonna have to add some sound on top, dramatic effects. For that.
Yeah, that dun dun. Yeah, I love
That's
Star
funny.
Wars. If we talk about Star Wars, I mean,
But we're
that.
gonna go off piece. It's funny because I know we've got our voodoo Val, who's also quite a moderator and also on
I
Adobe Live.
especially love
Yeah, love that.
noticing how, in terms of like learning film and all that, in Star Wars, they're like one of the notable things in their editing is that they use those slides, like those the kind of transitions that we probably would irk at today, just like those,
Like
just slide
swipe, you
over,
mean?
swipe, and just those, and I'm just like,
Almost
oh,
like clip art days, isn't it? A little bit. I don't know if you know
yeah,
clip
this
art, but yeah.
this was cool back then, you know.
But bringing it back, I'm down for that. I feel like it's that retroness where it's kind of like doing a 360, right? It's almost like having old mobile phones, but it's like almost like the brick light without color and just like analog. Bring it right back, and it's
there's a lot of that now. Yeah. I noticed that too.
Really Ferry, cool. We've got Ferry. He said, "There are no rules. Are there even rules? I think that's all guidance only." Yeah.
Oh wow.
That's the thing.
That's true.
That is very, very true. So.
Yeah, it's a good mindset to have. That it's guidance, right? Like it's good to take it with a grain of salt. I think there's nothing against kind of getting some feedback, right? Like we're going to do a portfolio review here. And I think it's really cool to be able to have feedback from folk in the same industry. Something I wish I had more opportunity to do while I was in school, because we didn't have that many opportunities aside from maybe our fellows, what do I call them? Students?
Yeah.
Them or other teachers. But I don't think I had like an online community when I was in school the way, you can now. Yeah. That you can, I mean, I would use that resource quite a bit. Even if your project isn't done, I think it's fair to just like give it that opportunity to be seen by somebody that may know a thing or two, where they can kind of guide you and let you know you're going in the right direction, or wow, this is a really cool concept. I mean, there's sometimes you think of concepts that are so brand new that everyone's going to be like, no, that's terrible, right? Because there's so.
But I think as well, even those for confidence as well. I always find that imagine, and I think especially for graduates and for third year students, where it's very difficult because it's so competitive. But it's that level of, even if you don't feel super confident, by having your work, say on an online, whether it's Behance or just an online community, it's not in person, so it kind of breaks down that barrier of having to feel really nervous. That makes sense. It almost feels like there's a layer which is obviously it's online. And also, it's still nice to meet in person and to talk it through, but not everyone has that ability of super confidence, and it's tricky with our industry as well because it is very competitive. So there's various ways you can kind of get your work out there and to.
Do you feel like it's really competitive in editorial design?
It's tricky, yeah. I mean, I graduated from uni 8-9 years ago. It's even weird even saying that, but trying to get into like the editorial world, like publishing, I always found unless you had a friend or your friend's dad or family in that space, it was so difficult because it's quite a nitwit, if that makes sense, very close community of people who kind of go back to the same. And it's starting to change, but I think now, once you're in there, you have an opportunity to really, sell yourself in that regards. So like now I've always said to myself, and I did it before, when I graduated, is that whilst I'm trying to find work leading into publishing or editorial, until I get that job role, just keep doing side projects, keep doing my own editorial piece, make my own zines. And eventually, if I keep sharing it out and sharing it with publishers, hopefully they'll reach out, which has happened a few times. So I think that's it for anyone really in terms of the industry, just kind of doing that sort of side hustle to kind of keep you afloat if you're trying to really desperately look for a role and it's just not coming.
Yeah, I think that's a good, I mean, I've tried to counter that strategy, wondering if like, will it really pay off if you work on the project, your dream projects, right? And I think, yeah, it does, because, when you meet, it's, what is it? Luck is preparation meets opportunity, right? Yeah. And I think, I mean, really, like, not to exhaust idioms here, but like, you just really, like, visuals just say much more than you saying, I know how to do this.
Very much so.
So it's really helpful to have like, here you go, let me show you, I've done it before. It wasn't for a project per se, so maybe I don't have that client experience that you would otherwise have, but I have it maybe in another space. But I can showcase this artwork that is sort of more or less in line with what you're looking for. And that works out, right? Like just knowing, having that affirmation that you've done it before, it's an easy, like it's almost like setting the red carpet for that client, and the client's less afraid because they're like, well, this is kind of what we were after. And who cares if they don't have the client experience? They clearly have the execution style. So so it's a good way to get those clients that you want, or the employer that you want, right? Because that's also another thing
very true. And I think as well, like to collaborate as well, I always find that it's, again, for anyone who's in the chat, if you're, you know, especially if say you're a student and you're in your final year, or just in general, it's that opportunity to collaborate with other people, you know, like-minded creatives, where I always find that if there's a project you really want to do or you're quite curious about, but you require people's skills, you know, reach out. You know, Behance is a very good channel for that. And you'd be surprised when people would just drop an email and say, you know, I've got a project idea, and you kind of, you know, bounce ideas, you know, whether it's people abroad or whether it's in the same country, and then you can actually make these things happen. I think that's, for me, that's the beauty of our craft, where you have an idea and you just make it happen, you know. It doesn't matter how long it takes to get there, but eventually, you know, you will get there. And that's the process. That's the fun part, right? Getting there. The journey there. So yeah, can't stress enough, you know, when you've got an idea, definitely make it happen.
Yeah, and send it to us, because we always like to give feedback.
we do Adobe Live, we're in a space where, and this is a good time to actually mention that as well, actually, but we definitely love to sort of see your work. And again, if you're always interested in wanting to share work, you know, good chances obviously via Behance, you know, make a profile if you're quite new, share your work, meet the other creatives on here. And it's a good time to mention now, actually. So about, you know, nearly an hour actually in, and if you just joined, you know, today on our stream, you know, massive welcome. And today we've got the very, very talented street photographer and graphic designer, Cyn Lagos. And you can see now we're having a bit of fun in Photoshop, collaging, overlapping, doing contrast. So get those questions in if you're on Behance, and I can definitely feed them directly to Cyn. So welcome, you just joined.
Yeah. Thank you for joining. So we're actually going to be including now another photo, and we're going to be using the magic wand tool because it is quite magic oftentimes if the picture's right. And I'm going to be removing, I'm going to be removing this, this is usually time consuming, right? Selecting areas that you want to remove are pretty time consuming. In this case, there's a lot of black here. So the wand is able to find it fairly easily, but you can, if you want to play with it, it's depending on the photograph that you're using. Of course, this displayed image here is like a solid orange. So it's going to be like a perfect selection. So the more that background is like solid, you're going to know it's a good candidate for the magic wand. But otherwise, you can also find sort of the tolerance level that it can work. It's magic. So I have it at 32. You can lower that a little bit as you continue to add some more elements. And I can see here, like it's collecting a few other things that I may not want, but that's okay because I can hold Alt, and that gives it that little minus sign on the wand, and I can undo certain selections, as well as like let it go and continue to, hold Shift and continue to add different little areas there. And that's like an easy way to just be able to select an area, even if it's not exactly perfect. Depends on what you're after, right? If you want an exact perfect selection, your go-to has to be, I'm gonna say, the pen tool, because it's just, it's at your, it's your selection process. Although there's a lot of new opportunities here in the properties. I don't know if this is a good candidate for that, but you're able to, I actually didn't try that before, but it just reminded me of that. You're able to select backgrounds, remove backgrounds in the property section, and select your subject. Something that also just sort of relates back to Lightroom, for example, and you're able to select your subject, and you're able to mask out a background. It's pretty cool how all of these techniques here will will be useful also for other programs, Adobe programs.
I love as well, like when that opportunity when you hover over your, one of those tools and it gives you that little snippet window of how to use it. It's those little tips and tricks that I think, especially if you're so new to Adobe products, it just makes things so much more digestible for the creative using it. So and we touched on this at the very beginning of the show. There's a lot of creative challenges and things that we do at Adobe Live. Definitely check those out, because you can obviously see Cyn right now working on Photoshop, but again, we do different creative challenges and different things in the program. So that's a really cool way of sharpening those skills. So get playing and get creating and share them, like Cyn said, as well. Share with us, because we love to sort of see that as well.
So this one here, I want it to look like it's embedded within the circle, and I don't want to have to select the circle again and have it sort of mismatch that globe that we just made. So instead, I'm actually going to hold control on top of the mask selection that we have here, and that's going to create the exact selection, replica of the selection again. And we're going to go into our image, this image here, the inner world is what I labeled it as. And I'm able to then add another, I'm going to actually put it in a folder just to keep it organized. Is it in there? Let's see, drop it in there. Okay, inner world. And anything on this folder, I can add this circle mask, and it includes it within that shape. And the same way as we did before, we can unlink that, and we're able to move around either the mask, or we can move around the contents of that mask. So I can sort of adjust where it is. This picture, unfortunately, I cut off the little point of.
I was just looking at that. My eyes honed in on the. I was like, "Where's the point gone on the?"
I know, it's one of those things where you're like, "Oh no."
Which is my brain thought when I saw that. It's the little things where you have it slightly overlapping the circle. It's just that I love though when you do that on design, where you kind of have like something inside the mask, but then you just have like a
little overlap.
Just a tiny overlap, just gives it that more depth. But,
right. Yeah.
We'll forgive you on the snippet of the rooftop.
I know. So when something like that happens, I mean, I'm able to crop it out, but then I would remove my friend here. So I'm just gonna pull it back, and instead I'm just gonna go in here and with a light brush, harness to 0, I'm going to just kind of fade it into the sky a bit, so it starts to blend and it's a bit more forgiving. So I'm going to be choosing the color black. In this case, I had it in white, so nothing happened. Black hides and white reveals. So we are able to do something like that. I'm gonna make it a little bit smaller. And
just
really,
I was going to say, in terms of like the tools that you use, do you use a tablet? Are you using like a pen, or is it mouse, or what's kind of like your method of?
So I'm going to say I reserve the Intuos tablet for any retouching on photographs. It's really lovely to use it for the pen tool too, because that takes quite a while, especially if I know it's like the bulk of the work is going to be doing that, then it's a bit more intensive. Finding the right like ergonomic way of spending so much time on a computer has been one of my missions. So I have like a lot of little ways. I mean, my mouse it's pretty ergonomic for my hands, but just stretching my hands, I feel like it's so vital. I just totally did that little crack. I think that's it's so helpful because your hand starts to kind of just look like a claw by the end of it. So the tech is valuable, but sometimes I think I've put at the forefront just for it to be comfortable, as much as it executes. Yeah, I'm really curious though. There's so many different things nowadays. There's like all of these like dials that you can have, and sort of like a Stream Deck. I don't know if you've ever used a Stream Deck before, but it's like where you can just add different functions to every button, and the dial can be increasing the size. It could be raising the volume. It could be different things. And I'm really curious to kind of use some of those gadgets, because it feels a bit more conducive to what we do here, right? Like as opposed to dragging. But at the moment, I haven't found the thing yet.
We need to, that needs to be, it needs to be, I'm gonna say a thing. And actually talking about a thing that is quite important in the chat. And actually this is something, it's funny because we've done so many lives over this period of time that it always kind of slips under the radar because we're so in the flow of the design. And Anika mentioned a very good point. Have we actually saved our file yet?
Wow.
We may have already. Because
you should, absolutely.
We're all guilty of it, don't worry. Thanks, Anika,
right? That's so funny. Let's save.
It's funny, only recently I've been starting to save a lot more on the cloud as well. And it's so, I mean, I have hard drives and things back up, but it's so cool having just another point of, you know, where you can save content like via the cloud or whether it's on computer.
Do you like saving to the cloud, to the Adobe cloud?
I do, yeah. So I mean, I do a lot of obviously work on InDesign Photoshop, but I only recently I've been doing a lot more saving to the cloud. Before, I mean, I might use say like a Google Drive or I might use a hard drive. I'm the kind of guy where if I'm working on something, especially like a big, you know, publication or book, I've got to save it in at least 2 or 3 places just for peace of mind in case things go wrong, right? And, you know, a glitch in the matrix and, you know, there's something that goes wrong. You just want to have a peace of mind of knowing it's there. So, yeah.
I definitely have a workflow when it comes to saving my work, either on the cloud or tangibly on a hard drive. Having copies is like the thing. I recently saw like an SD for sale. So I was like, I saw the state drive SSD and I was like, wow, I'm probably one of the few people that geek out about stuff like this. Like, yes.
No, you're in the right place to geek out about that stuff. you're in a good space.
So the Adobe Cloud, I'm curious about it because I do I would say my workflow, my workflow from transitioning from Lightroom Classic to Lightroom itself had been primarily motivated because of the cloud backup on Lightroom. And I really love that. I really love that being able to use it within different devices. I have, like I said, I have the iPad and it's such as accessibility and peace of mind because photos are just such a grand part of the things I have to store. But I haven't quite found it yet for this. I do love using my Google cloud, and I have it all embedded in my computer. Nice. So that's how I ended up, even though it looked like I was saving on the computer, it really is back to the cloud again. Nice. So I haven't used it for this, but I am really curious about it. Like I'm always trying to streamline that.
I always, it's interesting. I feel so bad sometimes for, especially for photographers or even videographers, because I mean, I'm editor, I'm print, and, you know, we have imagery, but sometimes it's typography I work with. So it's almost, you know, very much embedded in the program. But when you're working with video or photography, the size of your files, especially the imagery that you have, it's almost going to break the machine. I almost feel, I've seen so many memes of like trying to render a video or you know, having, you know, master photography files. It's just, it adds so much to the equation, I always find. Yeah, that was a tricky one.
Yeah, I don't think that's spoken enough about, but yeah, it's so important. Like you'll find out either the good way or the bad way that it's really important.
And so you see that color wheel and then you're like, oh crikey, what's happening?
So this fire here, I feel like it was really hyperactive. It was really windy, so it came out a bit like just not fire-like. I don't know.
Can you zoom in a tad? It's just
I'm judging. Like... Yeah. Let me see.
Nice.
I'm judging the fire quite a bit here.
Can't judge the fire, Cyn. That's the
right. Can't judge
the organic.
So I'm keeping this in mind because I think that when it comes to this is if say I was going to keep this, I'm going to just pull this over here. If I was going to keep this as a still photograph, I'll definitely like to replace that fire with something else. Right. So in Adobe stock, there's several different things that you can find, some a bit more realistic than others, right? But I feel like those are some situations where like compositing can be very helpful. Finding those, you know, like someone was referring to earlier, those external resources to be able to find assets.
Very, very true.
What I'm looking for something like this would be like a black background, because we can use our color modes to blend them together. And it's one of the easiest to think about, either white or black. Is very helpful to have in your backgrounds. In this case, I might look instead for a video format of this, because in After Effects, we will be animating that. And so that'll look a little bit different. Should we see what the animation looks like?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I think I'm really glad you got up the Adobe stock, because again, if anyone's quite new to that, that is a really strong, cool platform to kind of get your assets and content. Yeah. And also one really cool thing is that it has I'm sure you'll find this as you experiment and log onto the site, the different file formats as well. So if you need a PNG transparent background, if it's an EPS file, you really have the option to kind of work to what's best for you. So if you're quite new to Adobe stock, definitely have a browse, download some previews, and get going, because it's a cool software to work with. Platform,
yeah, it comes in handy, especially when I actually get inspired by Adobe stock sometimes, because it reminds me, hey, well, take a picture of that thing that seems ordinary, but maybe can become an additional asset to your library. And when I don't have that, then I can just go into Adobe stock and find this thing that is fairly simple. Sometimes it's just texture, like sand. I found that I've used things like that. Just arbitrary elements that I feel like will add to blending things together. Graphic elements.
I'm so guilty of that. I think especially when it's like an EPS or PNG, where it's like almost like paper texture, but it's like granular grain. I love.
Oh yeah, I love that.
You know what I mean? It has that sort of F, and it's just like
we're such suckers for that.
No, we're in a good place for like geeking out. But if anyone's also into their textures, I'd put it in the chat, because I'm
that
sure
old school film leaks. That's really fun.
Yes, I've got a whole folder on my hard drive like dedicated just to textures, like textures, fonts. That's crazy. That's what we've got to do, right?
We're so nostalgic.
Totally.
We're so nostalgic for like the sort of what would I call that? Like just simple 70s time. I don't know.
Yeah. Almost like, I can't remember even saying this, but it's almost like Stranger Things kind of. It's not even a thing. Why am I saying that? This is more like, does that make sense?
Stranger
like
Things.
kind of like a kind of that era where it's just there's layers to this. There's a textures on top. It's that kind of granular like film. It's just there's a lot that can happen.
Well, Stranger Things is emulating that texture too. Even the intro was completely like film. I don't know. I read something about that. It was completely filmed and then added, just as organic as ever to make it seem to really kind of do an homage to that time period. So I'm going to play this. I don't know if you can hear the sound from the monitor, but if you can't hear the sound, I welcome you to go check out the Behance post, or on Instagram. I also posted it. The sound, I chose something super cinematic and like kind of
interstellar vibes potentially. I'm getting
So it kind of plays a role, but nonetheless, this is the animated version of what we'll be doing tomorrow, in fact. So I'll kind of give you guys an insight of that.
Very cool. I love that little shooting star. That just the little things that kind of went by there, where it's just I noticed that. I'm sure a few of us. That's very, very cool.
Appreciate you for noticing.
Of course, and actually, I'm sure at the beginning, but there was like you have that thing where the shape just goes just behind the text, just behind so it almost feels like there's depth to, rather than it just being a static thing. Which I love that.
Yeah, it's nice to play with the Z dimension, right? Like it's what's behind it, and it's an interesting challenge to do in almost everything, because what we're experiencing in front of us is fairly 2D. no matter how much we play tricks on the eye, it's 2D. So the more we're adding things like placing it behind a layer, or in this case, even in this thing here, I blurred the foreground in order to make it feel like it's going back. There's depth, there's more depth there. Keep that in mind. I think that's a really fun way to play around with your layout design. And maybe I'll bring this into Aero. Now I'm just thinking about like really that cool. I think, C dimension.
I can totally see it working quite well. And I think as well, even because again, I work in editorial, but there's a lot of what you're showing us now is animation, but it can very much be translated across print, editorial, poster design, branding. Like you said, everything's 2D, it's on the screen, it's flat, but actually, just little details, whether it's the shading, whether it's the shape, the composition, it just adds that little extra oomph, right, to the design that way you can see it from a different perspective, which is really, really cool.
I've definitely seen it used in editorial too. It's fun to see something printed that has like have you seen like when maybe like I've seen some of my favorite like books, or when I go to the printer and I come back with 100 samples.
Good.
And it's like texturing something that in real life is textured. Like, I don't know, like the bark of a tree, and it has this sort of canvas paper to it. And then that's how you play like into the idea of making it feel a bit more dimensional.
I mean, when you mentioned like going to print with me, I mean, I could, a bit like the topic on Netflix and any other stuff, I could totally geek out on that. But I mean, again, for anyone, because obviously we're in a photography, stream today, but it's quite cool if anyone's into editorial print. I'm sure they can agree where you've got, that elements where you're designing something as a poster or magazine or book that, when it goes to print, that latter stage, you can get that sort of paper stock, and you can really have fun with looking at the different variants that you can play with, whether it's embossing, foiling, granular texture. For me, that's the fun part, especially the print elements, that print side of things.
Yeah, adding textures and just layering a bunch of them on top. I mean, sometimes some of these composites, I mean, this one's a fairly simple one, to be frank. I think some of these composites can get really, really complex, where you just have so many layers, and color coding comes in handy when something like that happens. So you can have a lot of fun with compositing. That might be your calling. I feel like I find myself playing with compositing because I just love taking my photography into different spaces and seeing what else I can do with it. I feel very lucky that I can produce my own assets oftentimes. And so I try to kind of put a use to them. I hate the idea of them to just collecting dust in a digital folder somewhere, right?
I get that. I totally get that. Again, actually, on that talk, because it's quite nice to know if anyone's in the chat, if you're a photographer, that's what kind of work do you kind of work on? Are you doing a lot of collage based? Are you maybe doing perhaps models, or what kind of ways or different routes within photography? If you're in that space, what do you do? Get that in the chat, and we'd love to hear it.
Totally.
Because for me, I'm in awe of that kind of space, definitely.
So I brought in this fire image for the moment, just to give you an example of how we would blend an image like this. And so this image has a black background. So something I learned about the blending mode, all of these, you can see here that there's a line that kind of divides them, right? So I would usually just go nuts and kind of just go over it like this. And whoa, there's a really trippy one here. I love that.
You just go scroll through them and see which one actually looks the coolest.
Exactly. So
crazy ones.
You can totally do that. But something that helped me a little bit is knowing that this section here sort of deals with blending black. So blending colors are darker. And this one here deals with blending colors or vice versa. This one here deals with blending colors that are darker, and this is lighter. So in this case, having the dark background, you can see there that I can just press screen or lighten, and any one of those kind of starts to do the trick. And then this is a bit more experimental. And then, can have a lot of fun with.
I mean, I'll put it out there.
Things.
If I was actually in that image or in at that location at the time of the fire doing that, I'd probably kind of freaked out. But I mean, it looks cool on the screen.
Just get blue fire.
Literally, just the heavens are open.
That's really hot.
Blue flames, like Hades style. We've got a question from Zajad, I hope I'm saying it correctly, who said, Cyn, are you working on Windows 11? I know you're working on Windows. Is it 11 that you're working on? Or?
I think it's 11, the last update I made. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's super. Actually, it was I was working for a museum in Austin. So I'm based in Austin, Texas. It's my permanent home, but I've been sort of jumping back and forth. I'm currently in Miami, and if y'all know me from some time, you know that a lot of my work, especially my street photography, was born here. And I'm so grateful to the city for that, because it was just such a great way to like introduce me into the space. Now I, practice it anywhere I go. I feel like I can never let go of the camera. I have like separation anxiety with the camera. Like I must carry it with me.
It's my baby.
But yeah, I've made up a very adult decision to just move to Austin permanently. So I did a test trial last year. It was super fun. Learned so much about the community. It's so cool to learn, new cultures. That's such a thrill for me in general. So y'all are out there. I'm adopting the word y'all because it's so genius.
I noticed that. I love when
it's so genius.
Just slipped in there. Actually, that's a good thing. We never actually spoke about, the background and where you're kind of, where you're streaming in from. And again, perhaps we should have mentioned at the beginning, but where are you guys, in the chat, where are you streaming from? Which part of the globe are you streaming from? Which is quite cool to go. So you're in Miami right now, aren't you? You said, Cyn, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It was a bit. Actually, the other day we had hail, and it was the oddest thing. There's not supposed to be any of that here.
It's funny you mentioned that.
It's
right
the Sunshine
now in the UK, the rain has just. I mean, I've been turning over. I shouldn't have been distracted, but the heavens have just opened up in the UK, and it's just there is a lot of rain. That's fun. It's funny because actually before coming on the stream, rain. My partner and I going to the shop to buy some fruit, and when the car kind of splashes you, it wasn't funny at the time, but now you can laugh. That definitely happened, which is but it's all good.
Yeah, it's really fun. I mean, one of the reasons why I really like states like Texas is just the abundance of nature, and I just love nature, and nice. Kind of pushing myself. For example, I'm not necessarily an astrophotographer or like a nature photographer. I didn't label myself that from the start. My pursuits were a lot oriented around urban neighborhoods and things of that nature. So, but being placed in a different ecosystem and finding that the same techniques sort of apply, and testing the same technology that you have, but finding different challenges. For me, that's what my experience was taking a picture of the Milky Way. It was an awe moment. It was feeling that fresh start, like I'm a student again, that we were talking about.
I love that.
And it's really cool to be able to experiment, and it's just by placing yourself elsewhere. Like I didn't buy any new equipment. I just kind of kept in mind what I needed to achieve. I needed to get some light, that's for sure. I need to have light involved.
But isn't it kind of makes you feel, I guess, small, right? When you see in context of the, I mean, I'm into my space programs and documentaries, but in the grand scheme of, especially what you're designing now, it kind of just puts in awe of how small we are, right, in the universe. It's very, very cool. But I like how you kind of, again, it's kind of like you've honed in with the circle and the kind of like community. Well, I say community, it just feels more very homely feel. It's quite a nice contrast. Yeah,
it's a different contrast. Definitely good to just kind of self-impose change and find yourself like just learning new things on that front, on the side of just living, right?
Definitely.
And being here actually in Miami has also been a great lesson. You just become so appreciative of all those things you kind of didn't see while you were you just you live in a place, you kind of forget about it, which is
Mm.
why is one of the reasons why I love photography, because it asks you to observe a bit more carefully.
Okay, I get
Um,
that. Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, one
and
thing I
so it
noticed
kind
a
of,
lot about your work was like community as well. You do a lot of, which I feel like it's something that I feel like resonates with also my own work. But I think that's one thing I really enjoy about seeing your portfolio and your work and design, is that it's so, you know, human focused and based on people and how they interact, which I think is really, really cool.
yeah, that's really interesting to me, to be able to kind of, I mean, behavior is always such a fun thing to kind of observe in different cultures, and the way we celebrate things, the way we commune, and we find ourselves in creating these neighborhoods that sort of resemble us. You know, I have a couple pictures there where I have folks passing by us. You know, I have this guy in a striped shirt passing by a striped wall, and I'm like, what are the odds? You know,
Let's document
so,
this. We have to document this now.
yeah, it's just something so funny about, or someone just hanging out, sitting by something that kind of looks like them. And I'm using the pen tool, by the way, in this case, because I think I lost a little bit of the roof here. Just something really odd happened, emerged. So I'm going to recreate it with the pen tool. And the pen tool is honestly a matter of really just practicing. The pen tool is a click and drag situation, right? So you want to select a section. You can hold shift to create a more of a straight line. In this case, I think I can just click and let it just do its thing. But when it gets to the rounded edges, I want to click and drag, and then come down here, click.
What's nice as well is that you get away with it, because obviously the shape is obviously quite, you know, it's solid lines. So unlike a curve where it's a bit trickier, maybe that's probably the best the best tool to kind of use pretty much in terms of that design.
That's a good point. I think a good way to practice could be trying to emulate simple shapes, as opposed to trying to, you know, you can just try to create the circle, for example. You'll be surprised how challenging that is.
It's like drawing a circle with a pencil, right? It's never going to be sharp.
Right, even drawing a circle with your pen, it could be kind of funky. So yeah, you can try that out. And then so after you do that, you can right click and select, what is it? Define custom shape, make selection, right? So I don't want a radius. I want it to be at 0. So that means it softens the edges. I don't need that in this case. And like we did before, I can add the mask, which will create white in the selection that I have. So you'll see that it removes that section. And we'll play a little bit by like increasing it a bit, so it comes sort of out of that space.
And just on that front, I'd say, so we're about maybe just over 20 or so minutes. So it's a good sort of chance to mention, you know, if you've just, you know, joined in now on the stream, obviously a massive welcome. And you can see today we've got a street photographer and graphic designer, Cyn Lagos. And she's in the process right now of designing on Photoshop with a few collages, which is great. So to get those questions in, if you're quite curious to know about Cyn, her work, her process, her background, and then we can share that directly with her via the Behance chat. And I can see as well, we've got quite a lot of people from different, you know, areas of the globe tuned in today, Cyn. So we've got Megan from Canada, Lisa from Spain, Tuo from Houston, Kim from Seattle, Steve from New Zealand. There's a lot of people from different time zones as well.
New Zealand.
Cool.
I've always wanted to go to New Zealand.
Well, Steve actually mentioned it's not old, but the New Zealand in the capital letters new. So nice
really?
pun, Steve. I like your style.
Nice.
Very
yeah,
cool.
it's in terms of nature, New Zealand is just gorgeous. So maybe we can go to New Zealand and create a new composite out of those photos.
Photographs. Let's do it. Do you ever do? I'm gonna geek out now, but like sometimes especially when it was during the lockdown, when you perhaps couldn't, you know, travel and experiment, is go on Google Maps. Right. So you just kind of use the little man and you just dot around and have a little walk around as if you're actually. It's
like he's hanging on one arm.
He's hanging on. Just literally we're both hanging on for dear life, and get a chance to explore somewhere we haven't been before.
Yeah. Yeah, that is really cool, actually. Like a lot of those resources, you'll be shocked how much you can see. But actually during all of that, what I found myself doing is digging into my hard drives. And so sort of like finding like, it was really fun because I would find a lot of different instances of my career that I hadn't seen in a long time. And I realized, oh, wow, I still do that. Or, oh, that's funny. I thought that was kind of cool. Yeah. But like most often than not, I was very, very in awe of how relentless my work was in terms of just like pushing a lot of different ideas. And I think in one of the live streams, we explored my very first website. And it was a lot of fun. It was what is it called? Wayback.com, I think it's called. So it keeps track. It's a nice little
it was way back.
Easter egg in the internet. But yeah, it keeps track of a lot of the sites that don't exist anymore. And yeah, we were able to look at my first website. And you would think like, it's a lot of these things, and a lot of people worry that, the first time that they do something, it's just not going to be as good as their future selves. Yeah. But I've been really surprised that, in fact, sometimes I learned that I should actually listen to that younger self, and that kind of like rebellious attitude of trying new ideas all the time, and not kind of withholding, trying new things, and also presenting myself as a professional, even though I wasn't there yet, but making sure that I was very thorough with how I presented my work. And big applause to that person. Back then, a lot of work.
No, I get that. I always find as well, like especially when you're like you're young designer or creative coming up, it's you don't mind having a bit of fun with it. And then when you get older, it's when you become a bit reserved. I mean, that's just from a personal experience. And I mean, I was looking at my, it's funny you mentioned going back over previous work, but where my parents are, I was getting in the shed and I saw like my old portfolio, like printed, like the massive A0 portfolios you might have. And I was kind of going through it and thinking to myself, like, your brain kind of thinks, at that period of my time when I was that age, what was I kind of going through in terms of why I created what I created? And almost like being really, critiquing your own work. But I mean, at the time, that was probably your best work that you thought you could create. So that's totally cool. I think it's trying to be too hard on yourself in that regards, because it's for its time. And yeah, I think that's the beauty of it.
That's kind of interesting that like a lot. I mean, we tend to be a bit hard on ourselves at first, but I think in my experience, a lot, like looking back, has always been very beneficial. Maybe a little bit less when it comes to like doing public speaking. It always feels a little like, where do we? But once the dialogue starts, we had this conversation. It feels a little bit easier.
We said that, didn't we, when we came on?
Yeah, it's just like, I mean, it's a bit strange nonetheless at the end of the day to find yourself like surrounded by technology. We're used to, eye contact, we're used to smiles, all the things. So it's really cool to nonetheless have like this connection, this ability to connect with people, especially on a craft like this, because generally one of the things that I learned a lot from moving from to a different state was sort of finding that design community again was really like a thing that I didn't even take into account. And being able to kind of go online and live stream on Behance was like this really fun way to still have those dialogues with other folk, but they weren't in that state. They were just everywhere. Yeah. So it was a really nice, it was a nice foundation. Like it's a nice resource, I guess, for connecting with people. And I think I didn't consider that. It's supposed to be the main thing, right? It's supposed to be why we use these platforms, but we kind of get lost in like the work, I guess.
I guess like the beauty of it as well is like there's so many different ways of how you could benefit from it and take from it. I think you mentioned at the very beginning towards a stream, and I do this myself, where if I'm designing, especially it's like late in the night, because of time difference, based in the UK and the US, I'll just watch some Adobe Live, but have it in the background. And again, I might not be actually watching, but just listening to like people communicate, conversate about design. It's cool because I don't know, you kind of feel like you're in that world as well, and you don't have to actually really engage, but it's just still feeling like you're part of it. And that could just be listening, that could be commenting. I think that's the beauty, especially what we do at Adobe Live. It's for you guys to learn, to be inspired, but also to feel like you're part of something bigger than yourselves. Definitely get involved where you can.
Yeah, working from home, that's fun. Like if you're like logged in. I've always loved working from home. I mean, I've always had side gigs, so it's always been a part of my process to be able to say, hey, I'm going to use these next 2 hours and have my studio and like just sit. It's a different feel altogether to be able to set your own environment. And I really relish in it. And so having like the community in the background, I totally relate to that. Yeah, it's super cool too. And then I just butt in every once in a while and saying
totally
hello.
Human. I love that. I think that's totally fun. And it's quite nice because again, in the chat, you sort of see people who are quite, people have been before. So like people who tune in quite regularly, and it's always nice to sort of see, regulars that come back and yeah, it does feel like even if you never actually met each other or even seen a picture of each other, it's just the fact that you recognize the name and you might conversate and you communicate and you have nice comments on people's work. I think that's the beauty of what we do.
I've totally had that same experience with Instagram actually. I made a lot of friends there, especially right at the start. Where you said, I think the part where you said that you have never met, but then like you still kind of bond.
It's like you know them already, right?
Yeah. Cool. So, and then we would have like photo walks and things like that. And I'd be like, oh, that's you. I had no idea. But like I knew their work more, and it was really cool. Sometimes we would be a bit starstruck. I remember my best friend back then. It was like, oh, I don't know if I should go talk to her. And I was like, go talk to her. Yeah, you really admire her work. Like, gotta.
It's a real person.
It's a real person, though.
I love that.
What do I do now? So I just want to say, as far as what we're doing here, so I replicated some of these spheres to sort to create like a sense of like there's an entire sort of like worlds kind of floating about. And also, so I just replicated the shape, but also continued to use the mask. So I used it on this blue color, so it showcases a little bit more. And what I'm thinking, and at this point, which is also important, is whenever I'm moving something around, I try to think like, what if this is the animation, right? So that you notice that like in the example, it went from behind and it went up. And so that concept or that idea was really born here in Photoshop because I was playing around with the spheres that I was creating. And I happened to have it behind the layer. It caught my interest, not just to leave it there as a static image, but wondering what would it feel like if you start to fill a dimension. So I would definitely encourage you to play around with your elements and ask yourself, like, what would I animate? Maybe your animation happens in your title, which, by the way, we just created a few text titles here. And I love including some kind of sense of title space because I love the idea of like making it feel like a poster or making it feel like a movie poster. So I would say something like maybe showcasing the title, or if we lowered the opacity and slowly increase the opacity, could that be the transition that we utilize in After Effects? So move your elements around, find ways. I know that I'm going to animate that fire for sure. I know I'm going to animate the sphere. Find ways that, even take notes. Like I literally keep a little notepad and I take notes. I take notes for everything.
Do you draw at all? Do you jump on a screen? Like, are you more of a scamping kind of person drawing out?
I think drawing was definitely like my first ever. Yeah, drawing and writing. I think the basics. Yeah. Drawing with a pen, drawing with a pencil.
But like with the projects that you do, are you like? Would you say you kind of draw out your maybe ideas for how it could, like for example, your collages now, do you have your assets and think, oh, that could be cool, but you do it by pen to paper first? Or?
Yeah, actually, more often than not, it's a good question, because more often than not, I do kind of sketch something out that I think could work out. It could be like a nice layout. In my notebooks, I think it's in my backpack now, but in my notebooks, I tend to keep just a template that like I draw ahead of time with a ruler of like vertical squares or horizontal squares, just so that I can jump in there once in a while and reimagine if I was to place type here, where would it be, just to kind of practice even in moments when I'm like on a plane where there's no internet connection, maybe, and I'm like, okay, maybe I could just draw some layout designs. So yes, I do. I love being able to sketch that before jumping into the computer. This one I didn't sketch, actually. It was absolutely just, hey, let's try it out. But I definitely love doing that because it's a lot faster too. Like your ideas on paper are a lot faster. So if that works out for you, definitely try that out, and try it several times. Don't just sketch one and that's the one, right? Just sketch several and bring out elements from that.
Definitely. I mean, it'd be great to know, from those in the chat, what's your kind of method in terms of how you operate? Are you a pen to paper? Do you do things on drawings first, or do you jump straight on the computer? What's your kind of way of working? I know for me personally, I mean, I live by Moleskine books, and I will be drawing, and to be fair, I'd even draw with a highlighter as well. Like I even highlight certain parts, especially if it's editorial or cover designs. It's nothing too in depth, but just enough that it gives you a bit of foundation to work on before you jump straight onto InDesign or other programs, because I kind of have to see kind of a route before I can jump. But yeah, I know everyone's obviously got a different way of operating, which is the beauty of it.
So you like more like being able to draw first above all?
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, I mean,
especially with layout design.
Yeah, especially with editorial, I mean, it's more kind of having an idea where imagery would sit, where text would sit, and I think it's very, very rough, but I will definitely go on the computer, not soon after drawing, if that makes sense. So I'll do it for a little bit and then jump on the computer. But it depends on timing as well, right? It depends on like the deadlines and how much time do you have. If it's a tight deadline, or then you have to maybe work a bit quicker than you usually would. So yeah, I think it depends on the project.
Yeah, I think it's good also if you want to pitch something, if you want to pitch it from the start, and you want to be able to like not have to spend the time to render something out in order to pitch it. Having the sketching skills can really come in handy. By the way,
when I say sketching, I'm not like a super like Picasso. It's like a 2-year-old child's done it. It's
like
super,
a random.
Yeah, it's only the only person I can understand it is probably myself.
Actually, to be fair, Picasso's like random, abstract, cubist. As weird as
I was the worst person. I don't know why I mentioned Picasso. That's like the worst person. It's like that's so talent. That's kind of... it's even worse than Picasso drunk. That's pretty much like I meant to say. Just a quick one. We've got a question from Arturo. He's asked, what is the best way to build your portfolio, would you say, Cyn?
The best way to build your portfolio. That's kind of like a pretty big question.
It's a bold one. You streamline
to build it. Well, one of the things that we talked about was being able to create projects that emulate the kind of project that you want. It's a definite, but also having the ability to curate which work can be a part of your projects and which work could sort of be on the sidelines. Maybe that's just not it. It's not cohesive enough. Having a network and allowing that network to kind of give you feedback and grant you kind of access or opportunities to work on projects that you're interested in. Granted, I don't encourage people to do things absolutely for free, but at the start, there's always like two values, right? There's monetary and there's opportunity. So if there's going to be an opportunity to that, to connect with others, to be able to, it might provide you the kind of project that you can include in your portfolio. It's totally worth your time, right? Like, and you get that client experience So having those collaborations is what I love. I love that word because it truly is a collaborative. Someone gets a need met and you get a need met, and that's when it feels collaborative, as opposed to like one side, right? So I would say those are like,
right? It's a two-way thing, isn't it? That's the thing. It's a two-way rather than one-way traffic.
It should be like sustainable on both ends. So it's interesting. That's a really interesting question. I think it happens over time. Time is probably the one thing that you cannot negotiate. It's gonna have to be time spent creating the kind of projects that you really like. Using mockups are really helpful for me to be able to say, for example, I wasn't able to go the length and print out these images, but I aim to make them for editorial. I aim the layouts to be functional for an editorial piece. But maybe I didn't have a client that produced the budget to print it. That's okay. You can always find mockups on Adobe Stock or mockups anywhere else, and then you'll be able to then put that together and really kind of showcase the realized version of that. And that's really cool. Like that feels like a more complete project, right? It showcases your layout design, and also showcases your ability to kind of pitch a project even if it hasn't come into fruition yet.
That's a very good point. I think as well, especially in the freelance or even just in the full-time employment world, but especially within freelance hair, it's sometimes clients it's very difficult to them to envision that final thing. And as designers, we try to articulate in the best way possible. But when you say a mock-up or something that really just shows the final execution, it really solidifies in their mind how it could actually look, and probably in your own mind as well. I mean, I say this, it could be on the basis of whether you're designing, a poster and you see it saying for the underground or subway, you actually see it in context beside a train station, or people can actually envision it actually being real than just a flat print on screen. It definitely sells
posters.
And
poster designs. Book mock-ups, really cool. I think that would be a great way to just build your portfolio. And then the other way, in terms of networking, just publish your work. No matter what stage of your career you're in, be bold, publish it.
Blogs,
launch
creative blogs, right?
I think the hardest thing in design is the failure to launch, right? Like you have wonderful work, but you don't publish it, and it collects dust and it's irrelevant at some point, right? Because this industry is so fast. So I think it's important to publish it, no matter how much judgment you might have, because you're a perfectionist and because you're detail oriented, and because we know that, right? We learn, we all are, and we're in a process where like what we know is a lot more vast than what we can execute at a time. So that's okay, because that execution could be an example of how much you progress once you continue to do that. But if you don't publish it, even for yourself as a reference, probably one of the most important. I love Behance for that. Constantly trying to publish more work and trying to get a sense in my website. It's like my little nook on the web. I place everything there. I try to find a way to make sure it's always up to date and find a sense of personality that I love being able to publish online. I think it's a lot of fun.
I think just before we, I was gonna say just very quickly as well, it's sometimes as well, give yourself that time to digest as well. I've always been a believer of, if you've got content but you don't feel confident just yet to say, if it's for social media, give yourself that time to kind of build up a nice archive of work, refine it, and then put it, rather than drip feeding stuff that you're not so confident or happy with. It depends on the person, right? It depends on how comfortable you are and if you're in a good place. But give yourself that headspace to digest and feel like you're in a good place to actually share it. And
if you don't feel like for example, one of the conversations we have often in the live streams that I do on Behance is know your audience, right? Like if your audience doesn't exist on Instagram, that's fair. Like it might not be there at all. So I felt like my audience was really relevant on Behance, for example, because it's just revolves around designers, revolves around people completely committed to these like little details in the craft. And whenever I don't know, then I create my own space. So like, for example, you've mentioned a blog. I love keeping a section for blogs and anything that I'm working on that can, it's almost like a journal, right? Like it falls under my craft, but it's still nonetheless just sort of this timeline. And it's incredible because these are all kind of like self-initiated projects, you know, being able to go in and document the protests, being able to kind of like understand some of like dissecting my own photography. There was this really rare occasion in this photograph where the photo says, "I have seen the future." And it's just really interesting to dissect my own work and just having these spaces to like, they're not confined to a certain genre. They're not confined to, hey, but will somebody be interested in a podcast on Instagram? Will somebody be interested in that I showcase my photos in a street gallery because I just placed them on the walls? Like, will someone be interested in that? It doesn't matter because I placed it in a space that is absolutely my work. And I feel like it's relevant that in places like Behance, somebody will be interested in that because there's a vast of genres there, which is one of my favorite things about it. So it's always going to be like a matter of you publishing and just finding, hey, where's my audience? And if I don't have one, can I just build a space where I can kind of start gaining that traffic for the kind of folks that care to listen to me? And it's been a long journey, you know, but it's been super fun to just have this sensibility of, okay, whenever everything else fails, I can always resort to my own space on the web.
No, I love that. I'm dropping some good gems. I was going to say, I mean, time has literally flown by, but we've got about maybe 9 or so minutes. Perhaps we maybe do like I mean, I don't want to interrupt your flow because I see we're having fun with the Photoshop.
Yeah.
And obviously we've got a bit of tomorrow as well, but perhaps for the last 9 minutes, maybe like a nice little recap.
Kind of
absolutely. What we've been doing and also a bit what we may be working on for tomorrow, potentially.
Yeah,
just
sure thing. So one of the things I wanted to do in this, and I feel like one of the main focuses is being able to repurpose my images, right? So we started with these images here, and I encourage you to go find a series of images that you might be curious to repurpose into a different design that will involve some of the compositing techniques we talked about today. But in this project, we played around with these images and found ourselves using the masking tool, the pen tool, some of the assets on our, we discussed some of the assets that are available to us, whether they're on our library or Adobe stock. If you don't have images of your own, I imagine maybe you don't, that could be an option, also to play around with compositing. And I think the key here is to also keep in mind that you're experimenting, right? We're experimenting, and it doesn't have to be a specific way. You might, in fact, like one of the viewers mentioned, want to save this project and maybe create a second version and experiment with a different layout. And I think that is probably one of the best things to do, to be able to just keep yourself sharp and find new ways of playing with Photoshop.
I just realized as well, actually, did you ever do, and this is going way back into school days now, but almost like I used to cut out comic books and magazines and almost like stick them on top. And it almost gives me that feel of like that was like collage, I should say, but in its purest form, where it's just, you know, using comic books or using cartoons and just overlapping. And that's kind of fun. I mean, people still do that now, but it's cool to sort of, I guess it's all very much digitalized, but I mean, I totally get that vibe when I see your stuff.
I was going to add some dimensions here. I totally did that to place collages on my wall.
I used to get in trouble at school. I used to do it on my school book, but that's a whole conversation in itself.
I'm going to do a little bit of separation, since we just talked about like that Z axis. So one of the last steps that I like to do is create a folder where I have lights and shadows. So this image is predominantly dark, so I'm going to probably focus a lot on any highlights, anything that will allow these spaces to kind of feel a bit more separated from each other. So for example, in this case, I might want to, and I'll move these around behind different subjects. So for example, our main subject is in here, I think, the inner world. So I'm going to create a light underneath that circle.
The inner world. I love that name.
The inner world.
It just feels so profound. Yeah.
I know, right? Can't help myself. So I think that's this one here. All right, so I'm just gonna start painting. And you can also send things to back by using the control open brackets or command. And you can just start to see how like the light starts to kind of go to the back. And then that gives it a bit of
that's cool.
Change. And then you can also find ways to multiply it. I'm not touching the right one, so that they blend together. And I'm gonna do it.
It's been super cool, like seeing this process, you know, over this past 2 hours. Excuse me, having the assets that you found, the photographs, and then overlapping and then the different color contrasts. It's really cool to see it come to life.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's cool to see other people's like workflow, right? Because you might have a different way of approaching this, which is kind of interesting to consider. Like maybe there's a different approach that works for you in terms of execution. I'm gonna do that probably a little bit less of that one. Yeah, so I like doing a few of those. And then one last thing here.
Like all this talk of like space, I'm gonna have to watch like some sort of space movie tonight, or because I'm in that mood now where you've seen some really cool shots and imagery. You've given us the inspiration now, Cyn, I think.
I'm gonna add the Lost in Space is a good movie. A good show. I'm gonna add here a black background, and I'm going to go into filter, render lens flare. And then we have options to include different types of lens flares, right? So that we can use it sort of as an artificial light, maybe something that would exist in space. We'll see. And then I just added it into a black layer because what we want is the black layer to blend. And like we did earlier, this second section is about the darker blending. So we're going to use maybe something like screen to be able to include that in there. And then, it might be too abrupt there. So you can always use a bit of masking. Let me see, to make it a little bit more part of the image.
Oh, that's awesome. Very cool.
And I'm going to bring it to the top, actually.
So I feel like we definitely need that dramatic sound on top just to kind of give it that sort of, cherry on the cake, right?
The cinematic sound.
I thought you were going to start recording your own sound there, Cyn, when you went into your little moment. That'd be great.
I'm not opposed to that. I definitely think it's fun.
That could be another stream in itself. I love that.
Yeah, so there's different ways to kind of start incorporating different elements to create, to highlight some of the areas here. And you can play around with the different lens flares that are available so that you just start to create a sense of dimension by having lights sort of stand behind the layers, right? Because at the end of the day, these layers are 2D, but we're going to try to find ways to give that visual effect.
No, I think that's been amazing. It's and I think again from the comments we've seen today, it's everyone's been really intrigued, captivated, and sort of seen your process. So it's been an absolute pleasure to sort of see you design, Cyn. So I got without that kind of mentioning now, I would say we're in that sort of last part now of the stream.
Okay.
But I mean, we've definitely got maybe actually we don't. As much as I would like to add some more time on top, we don't. But that being said, we will be back here tomorrow. So that's not the end of the show, guys. Well, it's for today, but not for tomorrow. So definitely sort of tune in. We'll be back tomorrow for 9:30 a.m. Pacific for part 2 of Cyn Lagos's stream, and she'll be looking on combining graphic design with photography again using different programs. So, stick around if you can for the latest Illustrator Creative Challenge with Jack Watson immediately, followed by designing an artistic zine with Kiana Maria. So that's it for today. Cyn, thank you so much for being awesome today and showing us your design process.
Thank you for having me. This has been fun. And we'll see you guys tomorrow for animation.
Definitely. And a massive thank you to everyone who's joined, of course, the Adobe Live team, for keeping everything nice and safe and sweet. And take care, and we'll see you guys for part 2 hopefully tomorrow. So have a good one. Bye.